In here, I think this is still on. You turn this one on. They turn it on. Okay. All right. Are we good now? Okay, because I was hearing an echo. It's all right. Okay. Yeah. Is it still on? We're good. Okay. All right, guys. We're almost at the end of the series, and I hope that it was good for you, and I hope it has been good for you so far. Uh, we are going to talk about that topic tonight, and it's a topic that I hope that we can talk about. That you can ask your questions if you have questions on it, and if there's somebody apart from myself who has an answer, we can always share and talk about it tonight. So I'm trying my best not to be the only person who's doing all the talking tonight. All right. This topic is a very important topic for the series, and again, I appreciate the invite. I appreciate the series, and the idea of having principles. As I said the last time, there are things that we have to learn. And so, in the class tonight, again, we're going to talk about learning. Last time I was here, we were talking about worship, and we talked about the principles of worship and how to make worship work for us and to improve our victorious lives. That's what we're going to talk about. But we're going to talk about a few more principles, at least 3 more principles that we can use to help us to have a more victorious life in Jesus Christ. When we consider the topic, to be determined, to press on, to endure, to win, if you notice what's in the background of the slide, it is quite relevant to what's happening in France at the moment, right? Olympics is still happening, and apparently the USA has gotten faster. I still go back and I watch those. For Jamaicans, this is what we do. Around Olympics, we have to refresh our memory on how fast Usain Bolt was. 9.58, like nobody's even coming closer than 100 years. And so our Olympics, like, yeah, these guys are just trying their best. We know that. But that's what this period is all about. It's all about the Olympics, and it's all about people being victorious. They train for years for this, not just for 4 years, but they will tell you they have been training for this for all their lives. And then in 10 seconds or less, it's over. You win, you lose, and you have to deal with that. For some people, they travel, they go, and they get a little bug, a flu virus, they can't run. They've been training for this all their lives. Christianity is not like that. But there are some bugs, right? And there are some ways we can pull a muscle here and there. And so we have to be careful when it comes on to our race also that Jesus Christ has called us into. And so what does it mean to you to be determined? These are words that we know. These are words that we hear. These are words that we use. To be determined. What does it mean to press on? What does it mean to endure? And I think we all understand what it means to win, because we all want to win. But what does it mean to you? What comes to your mind when you hear and see the word determined? It's yours. Do not give up. It's a big one. Focus. I like that one. I tried meditating once. I still have trouble meditating. This brain just won't. It's sometimes I have to tell it, just go to sleep. You've said enough. But staying focused is not easy. Not just in our thoughts, but in things that we do. We are doing so many different things that it's hard sometimes to focus. So to be determined, it means don't give up. Yes, it means to be focused. Let's talk about press on. What do you think of when you think of pressing on? Apart from the song. Keep going, right? Yeah, keep going. Keep going even when it's hard, even when the conditions are not ideal, conducive. Something I learned in my undergraduate years, a friend of mine in Texas told me, she always has a way of saying the right things, Like, there are some things that you want to achieve in life, and if you're waiting for the right moment, you will never, because the right moments are never there for some things. You have to learn to press on even when things are not going the way that you really want them to go. And endurance is that big word, right? The athletes will tell you, I mean, the long distance runners, you don't want to see them on the sideline doing their V thing, you know. I tried doing that once and I got bored just going around in circles, so I just quit. When I was in college, I'm like, I can't do this, it's boring. I feel like a little dog chasing my tail in circles, I just can't do that. But it takes that. It takes endurance. It takes hanging in there. It takes feeling the pain and still knowing that there is a goal and you want to be victorious and you are going to win. You want to win and you are not going to quit halfway on this track, right? And so endurance literally does not mean good things. If you're enduring, a nice massage, you're not enduring a nice massage. You're enjoying a nice massage, right? You don't endure a nice meal. Like, man, I just had to endure some good Jamaican food. No. Unless you're addicted, unless you're, what's the other word? Not addicted, but unless you're, I just lost my vocabulary there. You're allergic to it. Or it makes you sick and you're enduring it. But when we think of enduring something, it's never something good. We endure things that are not comfortable, right? Just so that we can actually win. And so we've talked about it, to be determined, having made a firm decision and being resolved not to change it. And when I wrote this sentence, there was a song that popped up in my head, which we sing. You probably would remember it from Jamaica. I have decided, I think it's in some of our songbooks. We only do the chorus part though. I have decided to follow Jesus. And there's a line that says, the world behind me, the cross before me. Though none go with me, still I will follow. And that's Christianity. We have made a firm decision, and maybe you had that little circle thing that I do when I have a baptism, and we ask them, hey, how long do you plan to serve God? And they'll say, forever, until I die. And then sometimes when you're in bed thinking about the people, you remember when they said those things. Remember when you said those things, when I said those things. And sometimes we know that we have made mistakes and others have, and that they need us to reach out to them maybe and to remind them in a nice way and to encourage them. But to be determined, having made a firm decision and being resolved not to change it. Hey, it's like marriage, right? For those of you who are, and for those of others who have faltered along the way, you did not go into it thinking that, you know what, I'm going to change this thing halfway down the road. No, no one does that. You made a firm commitment, but things happen in life. Things happen in life, and sometimes we don't get to the end of the decisions that we've made. People drop out of high school, they drop out of universities, they drop out of jobs. There's so many things that can derail our decisions sometimes, but that's what it means. It means to be determined. To press on, it's moving forward, and we're going to talk a little bit about that concept later on. To endure, it's to suffer. There is no other way. It's to suffer something painful or difficult patiently. Not cursing and screaming and, blaming everybody else, but when we talk about Christian endurance, and we're not going to get too deep into some of these words, but it is not enduring in a certain way. It's enduring in a certain way, rather, that you are enduring this, but you're also enduring it peacefully, and you're in harmony with people. And by the time you're through enduring it, people are still around you, and you are still in good relationships. So when we talk about those words, that's what we're talking about, and we know what it means to win. Everybody likes to win. And not winning sometimes can be very traumatic for some people. It's amazing how not winning certain things that you think, come on, you'll be all right. But no one goes into anything to lose anything. But sometimes we don't win. For Christianity, we all can be victorious. Last time I was here, make sure I'm following my own path here. Last time I was here, remember, it was not so long ago, we had this slide up. And I thought I'll use the same slide. And we're talking about a victorious Christian life. And when I think about a victorious Christian life, these were 6 things. These are not pulled from a book, from a chapter in the Bible that says this is exactly what we're talking about. This is what came to my mind when I think about what it means to have victorious Christian life. Hope, love, commitment, virtues, dependence, and a lover of worship. Remember that one? That was the one we talked a lot about. That when you're having a victorious Christian life, these are things that you find that are becoming a lot easier for you. Your struggles are on the other things, but these are things that you find that you enjoy. Your hope in heaven keeps you going. Your love for God, you're inseparable. Nothing can separate you from the love of God. In other words, you're determined, right? And you've made a strong commitment, and you are sticking to the commitment, and you have been practicing it so much now that it's easier. That's the beauty of it. Contentment, you don't want all the things in this world anymore. You're more contented. Virtues, the love, the joy, the peace, the long suffering, the patience, all of those things, they're becoming a little bit easier for you when you are living the victorious Christian life. Even loving the people who don't love you. They're human beings. They need help. Right?
You know, you started the conversation with the Olympics, and it was interesting. The other night, the Chinese swimmer, the diver, won gold, and they were talking about that from age 5, the Chinese government,
Mm-hmm.
it was
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit different, but the same. I guarantee the individual had the same feelings as someone from another country because they won.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just a little bit different emphasis on how they got there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing about Christianity. It doesn't matter, like you're saying. I started when I was 14 years old. I mean, somebody else might start when they're 50 years old. It doesn't mean that you have to spend 30 years to get here. It all depends on how determined you are and how focused you are on your relationship with God. Paul switched from Judaism to Christianity, and we might say he outdid some of them, but I like to remind folks that when you think about the disciples, you have to remember that they did the work that they were called to. Not all of them were called to write. Some of them were just called to do the evangelism and to do the legwork. They were foot soldiers for God, and they did it. Others were called to write, and Paul's ministry was not just to be a foot soldier in apologetics for Jesus Christ. He was called also to write and to structure the new church. So it doesn't matter when you start, you can still get there. But when you're getting there, it's not a goal that you get to and you win this and you hang it on your wall and you are now living, or you have a Christian life, a victorious Christian life, and you never have to do anything else. No. We know that. We're grown up in Christ enough to know that this is a continuous effort and that we can make mistakes, but we get back up and we continue on the journey. But I like these because we're going to get back to them when we consider the principles that I'd like to share. So what I want to do tonight is to share 3 principles that I hope that we can talk a little bit about. Principles that can help us to actually be a little bit more determined, right? We can use them to assess how determined we are, and we can use them to help assess if we're moving forward, if we're pressing on, right? We can use them to determine how much we are gaining ground in living this victorious Christian life. So let's take a look at the first one. Let's go to Philippians chapter 3, please. I want to read it. Let's read it first. Philippians chapter 3. It's well known for most of us here. I brought my big Bible tonight so I can see. I haven't used this one in a while. I've switched to the New American Standard. This was my New King James Version. Exactly. When you're preaching and the light is not so bright, yeah, you need something. Now I can't find. All right, here we are. So Philippians chapter 3, Paul is talking about his past, he's talking about his present, and he's talking about his future. And in verse 11, he says, if by any means I may attain, let me go back to to verse, let's pick it up at verse 9. Verse 8, verse 7 is where I really want to start. Verse 7, but what things were gained to me, these things I counted loss for Christ, yet indeed I also count all things loss for the excellence of the knowledge of Christ Jesus my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, that I may gain Christ. That's the entire series. That's the entire topic right there. We can see the determination, right? We can see the endurance, right? That he is willing to suffer through the loss of all of these things so that he might gain. And that's the goal. That's what he wants, to gain Christ. Be found in him, not having my own righteousness, which is from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness which is from God by faith, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death, if by any means I may attain to the resurrection from the dead. Not that I have already attained, or am already perfected, but I press on, that I may lay hold on that for which Christ Jesus has also laid hold of me. Brethren, I do not count myself to have apprehended, but one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forward to those things which are ahead. That's a good principle, isn't it? Verse 13 is where a principle is going to come from. That if we're going to stay determined, if we're going to stay, we lost contact here? All right, there. We went way too fast there. Okay, all right, here we go. All right. Okay, there we go. So that's the principle that we're going to talk a little bit about. The first principle that can help us to become more determined, to endure a little bit more, so that we can actually gain and to press forward. That's where that principle is coming from. I can probably go out on a limb and say the person who organized this theme had this verse in mind. That this is where it's coming from. You have to forget and you have to reach forward. So let's talk about that one a little bit, because it's easier said than done. What does it really mean to forget in this context? Is God asking us to wipe our memory clean? I think that no, he's not doing that, is he? What do you think he's asking us to do? Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna take that point and I'm gonna share a verse that is not in the. Go with me to John 16. And if you heard what she's saying, that it means, look, you might hit a snag in the road, you might hit a bump in the road, you might make a mistake. Don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on it until it affects the rest of your journey. You saw some of the races. I don't really watch a lot of these things, but the few that I've seen were pretty exciting because somebody fell. It's like, I hear guys talk about the races, the NASCAR races. They look for you got to have an accident. If there's no accident, there's no fun, right? Or hockey, somebody needs to get hurt, or it's no fun. So I saw some guys falling over, but they didn't stay down. They didn't crawl off the track. They got up and they continued to run. When Jesus Christ was preparing his disciples for his crucifixion, in John 16, he gave them comforting words. And I take comfort in this also. He says in verse 31, John 16:31, Jesus answered them. Of course, the context is he had just told them something, and verse 29, they declared, his disciples said to him, see, verse 29, sorry about that, verse 29, see, now you are speaking plainly and using no figure of speech. Now we are sure that you know all things and have no need that anyone should question you. By this we believe that you came forth from God. And Jesus answered them, do you now believe? Indeed, the hour is coming, yes, has now come, that you will be scattered, each to his own, and will leave me alone. And yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. What is Jesus Christ trying to do there for them? Jesus Christ is trying to preempt what's about to happen to them. And Jesus Christ is telling them, look, I know that you think you're at the pinnacle of your faith. I know you think you believe so much that nothing can move you or shake you. In a few moments, all of that, you're going to start second guessing this very statement that you have just made. You are going to start wondering, do I really believe? And can I really run this Christian race with Jesus Christ? Can I really get back up and be the disciple that Jesus Christ really wants me to be? And so Jesus Christ is literally here putting his arms around them, and he's telling them, look, you are going to make a mistake. Don't let it define you. Don't let it define who you are supposed to be as a Christian. But you can get back up. And if you read John 21, you'll see that Jesus Christ is doing that for them. In John chapter 21, he is reinstating Peter, who denied him 3 times, and he is getting the disciples to think, to be one, to be united, and to trust each other before Acts chapter 2 comes along. And so she's right. When we say Jesus Christ is saying to us, forget, that's part of it. That sometimes you have to forget the mistakes that you have made and not to allow them to define who you are supposed to be with Jesus Christ. But it also means, as she was saying also, that it means not to allow it to influence you. There are some things that you are going to have to forget, and I'm wondering if I have that other slide that I do have it there. So there are some things that we're going to have to forget. Remember this list, please. This list is going to come up, I think, once or twice more. That once upon a time, before you became a Christian, maybe you had hope in something else. Maybe this was it for you. You were always trying to be the best human being you can be, and you wanted to accumulate the most wealth you could accumulate, and it controlled your life. Maybe your hope has now changed, and maybe it should change. What about love? What was your driving force? What did you love the most? Of course, we could go to verses that tells us not to love the world. 1 John chapter 2, I think I might come to that later on. Do not love the world. Well, when you're not a Christian, the things that you love, it's a little bit different, isn't it? It's a little bit different, a lot different. When you become a Christian, that might have to change. You might have to forget past love. Look, this is not just about people and places. It can be things also. Not just things and places, but people. And there's some people that you will always love them, but are you going to allow them to have influence over you? Contentment is a big one. Paul tells us to be content with what we have. When you become a Christian, you might have to be content with a little less, especially if you're in the public sector working. Some jobs are just designed to take you away from God, it seems. So when you become a Christian, you have to assess your past, where you are with Jesus Christ, and now is a good time to do it also. Assess where you are. Are you allowing things that you love that God does not love, or contentment, or virtues, or who are you really depending on the most? We have to assess those things to see if the past still has a hold on us. If the past, whether it's a person, whether it's a place, whether it's a thing or things, still has or have holds on us, and they're still influencing how determined we are as Christians and how much we're trying to endure, and whether we're moving forward or whether we're moving backward. Because here's the thing about moving forward in Jesus Christ. It is not one or the other. You can't forget unless you are reaching forward. You can't take up unless you have put down. So it's not like Jesus Christ is saying, look, there are some things, other things, I get it. You can still put them in a nice bag, put them on a thumb drive. It's easier to carry with you, right? Whatever it is. And you can still move forward with those things because you have contracted them down. No. He's saying you have to forget and you have to move forward, which is what Paul was actually doing here, forgetting, and he was actually moving forward. So I find that in our quest, I'm trying to find page 1 here, in our quest to be determined, right? To press on, to endure, this is a big principle. Because I still think one of the reasons why our benches are not all filled, even on a Wednesday night, and especially on a Sunday morning, it is because people are still holding on. They haven't let go. Yeah. 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 Or in a ditch. Or, yeah, so, yeah. So it seems simple, doesn't it? But there is no middle ground in Christianity. And Jesus Christ never gave us a gray area to live in. You really have to pack it up. And you have to realize that these things are not good for your soul. And you have to be willing to walk away from even old friendships.
Song I learned my first campaign in Jamaica, Great Change.
Yeah.
Love the song because the words are just so
Yeah. There's another one I was singing coming over here. It's Jamaican. Press along, saints, press along in God's. Yeah, those songs I just wish I could sing them. Some of these songs, they don't sound the same in refined English. It's more heart. There's just a whole lot more heart in it. Like, you could lose the meaning of some of these songs. Even the songs that we sing, trying to sing harmony. Just let it go, like I said in my last presentation. Just let it go and sing praises to God. Nobody's going to say, no. Sorry. Sorry. Right? But, friends, you have to do your own assessment. And you have to decide if there are some things you are hanging on to from the past, people that are still trying to control you and trying to take you away from Jesus Christ. And there are times when you just have to make the cut. And you have to tell them, I'm sorry, you are not a good influence on my life with Jesus Christ. You have to go, or join me, better yet. But if you don't want to, then I'm sorry. Obviously, I'm not the best person to have the best influence on you, and you're obviously having the negative influence on me. I am not as strong as I'm supposed to be, so you know what, I'm just going to have to sever this time. But this is one of the principles that can help us to just move forward, to be more determined. And if you're determined, you are going to have to cut. You're going to have to lose some of the things that are influencing you in the wrong way, so that you can actually just be lighter and just move forward. Surround yourself with spiritually minded people, and surround yourself with things that Jesus Christ is going to be happy with. I always like to say it this way: look, if you can invite Jesus Christ with you, don't go. And if Jesus Christ is not happy with what you're doing and you're concerned about that, it means that it's not what you're supposed to be doing. And we're grown enough to know that there are some things that we have to leave behind, and there's some things that we have to reach for. With all. Yeah. It doesn't come naturally. If it did, I mean, Jesus Christ would not have to die. So, principle one, forget and move forward. Let's take a look at principle now. Principle two, again, we've just messed with that one. Principle two, the next two principles, they seek to answer the how question. Because that's just where it is, right? Like, we were just talking about what we're supposed to do. But how do we do it? How do we forget? And how do we actually reach forward practically? So I want to share two principles that has helped me, and I hope it can also help you. Principle one is actually right there from Romans 12 and verse 2. They're biblical principles. Romans 12 and verse 1 talks about our reasonable service, right? That we must be willing to offer our whole bodies to Christ as a reasonable sacrifice. I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So, let's say, for example, that you're a new convert in Jesus Christ. What is the first thing that they do for you? They stick you in a new converts class. They invite you up here, they hand you a certificate, and they give you a Bible. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why they give you a Bible. Even if you have one already, we want to be sure that you have a copy of the Bible, because that is now your constitution, your everything. Without the Bible, you cannot know how to please God. And so, this is the second principle. You have to be willing to have your mind renewed. That is not easy. But that is where it starts. You have to be willing to renew your mind. Now, what does it mean when we say we're going to renew our minds? Because that's the thing about it. What does it practically mean when we say we're going to have to renew our minds? What comes out of our minds? What do we do with our minds? Everything.
Paul says in Ephesians 4, putting off the old man, which grows corrupt, and put on the new man.
Yeah.
By changing your mind. So we have to, again, it gets back to your first point, forgetting those things that were behind the world. And the only way we can forget the world is to change our thinking.
That's right. So, how do we do it? It starts with education. That's why we go to baby school. I find it so fascinating to be able to teach somebody to write. That is something I've never had to do, to teach somebody to write. How do you teach somebody to write? It's just repetition. You have to learn how to do the thing. You have to know to draw the lines, and you do the little perforated letters, and you trace and you trace and you trace until one day, ta-da, you actually know how to write your ABC. It's the same thing with speaking. You learn, little by little you learn, and that's the thing with Christianity. We're babes, we become babes, and now we have to retrain our minds when we are maybe 14, or 25, or 30, or 50. That is not easy, because we are now set in our ways, right? And God is now telling you that you're a babe, I'm going to have to retrain you, your knowledge, right? Be transformed by the renewal of your mind, so that you can actually discern what is the will of God. This is the will of God, especially the New Testament, right? That is our will, that is our testament, that is God's constitution for us. That is the apostles' doctrine for us, Acts 2:42. So it begins by knowing the will of God. You cannot do, there are some things that you can do naturally in life, but there are other things that you cannot do. In other words, if you can drive a nail with a hammer, that does not make you a carpenter. Well, I would be one, right? I mean, I could be a truck driver if all it took was drive. I've never driven anything bigger than that truck I have, right? It takes more than that. It's the same thing with Christianity. Not because you're a nice person, not because you're an honest person, not because some of the virtues you have because you've always strived to be a Luke 6:31 person, do to others as you would have them do unto you. There is far more to that, to Christianity, than those things. And so you have to be willing to have your mind renewed. Like, we're not going to brainwash you. That Jesus Christ wants to retrain you. And that is why we have renewing. It's a renewal process. You have to accept that. And then I'm going to share the third principle that is going to build on this principle. Let's go first of all, though, to 2 Corinthians 5. And then we'll go to the third principle, and we'll try to put all of these principles together as we close. You notice that there are a few verses there, and I want us to read through them, so let's go there, please. 2 Corinthians 5. 11 through 17. All right, are we there? All right, 2 Corinthians 5, 11 through 17. We're there? All right. Knowing, therefore, reading from the New, the terror of the Lord, we persuade men, but we are well known to God, and I also trust as well, known to your consciences. For we do not commend ourselves again to you, but give you opportunity to boast on our behalf, that you may have an answer to those who boast in appearance and not in heart. For if we are beside ourselves, or we are crazy, it is for God. Crazy for God. That's okay. Or if we are of sound mind, it is for you, right? So we might look crazy and act crazy and say crazy things because of God, but it is for you that we're actually still in sound mind. For the love of Christ compels us, because we judge thus that if one died for all, then all died. And that's what we're saying. First of all, what compels you? What controls you? It has to be the love of Christ. Can't be anything else. When you're controlled by love, we've all been there. Come on, people. We've all been in love, right? Maybe in and out and all. When we're in love and you look back, remember your days? Probably was a little silly guy trying to impress, doing crazy things. But love really does make people do weird things when we're compelled by it. Love makes people do some things that they wouldn't ordinarily do, even bad things that they think it's because of love, but it's not love. It's jealousy and it's other things. It's envy. But when we're compelled by the love of God, it is going to make us more determined to just be more for God. So the writer says you must be compelled by the love of God. And then it says, and he died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them and rose again. That's not easy. It's not easy to live for somebody else, especially somebody that you cannot see. And some of it you have to believe that he exists. Hebrews 11 verse 6, right? And that he's going to reward you if you diligently seek him. But that's what Paul is saying. I know it's not easy, but he says you have to reach at this point in your faith in God that you're controlled by the love of God, and you're willing to give yourself over to him, and that you know that you no longer belong yourself. Verse 16 and 17, therefore, from now on, we regard no one according to the flesh. Even though we have known Christ according to the flesh, yet now we know him thus no longer. In other words, if there was one person in the flesh that should influence us, it was Jesus Christ when he was in the flesh, and he's no longer in the flesh, so no one in the flesh is supposed to control you anymore. No one in the flesh is supposed to have that level of influence over you to take you away from God. And then he says it in verse 17, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. All things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. In addiction, there is a thing called the threshold that you must cross by yourself. There's a reason for that. Even in my own counseling, you have to come to me if you ask for counseling. Unless you cannot move, I have to be convinced, even in the smallest of way, that you're not being dragged into counseling. Otherwise, it is probably not going to be any good to you until maybe the 5th session. You're wasting everybody's time. No one dragged you to Christ, did they? We're all free. We all came to Jesus Christ because we wanted the victory in Jesus Christ. And Paul is saying this is where it begins. You have to accept, and this is something that we have to teach folks who are becoming Christians before they become Christians, that you are going to have to be renewed. You're going to have to be retrained. You are going to have to learn and relearn certain things, which is our third point. That if you come to Jesus Christ and you accept that your mind is going to have to be renewed, then the next thing that we talked about before, and we're going to talk about it again in a little bit more detail next few minutes that we have, is Hebrews chapter 5 and verse 12 to 14. If you don't remember any other verse tonight, please remember this one. It is just so cool. I just love this verse. There's no other words to describe it. Paul says, encouraging the Christians to step up their learning so that they can teach others. It is not just to be able to vocalize words, but to be able to teach by their lives also. Anybody can learn something and teach it. But there's a reason why you have Brother Melson standing before you teaching. I mean, if he just goes off the deep end, he's fired, myself included. Right? It's the same thing in the pews. We want brothers and sisters doing things for God to lead others who have not just knowledge, but have wisdom, spiritual wisdom, that they're living faithful to Jesus Christ, that they're examples for Jesus Christ. And this is what Paul says now. Solid food is for the mature who, because of practice, have their senses trained to distinguish between good and evil. And apparently I moved it from CF to the bottom, Ephesians 4. So here's the thing. What are our five senses? We have more than five now. I mean, there's this thing going on in psychology where we do have a few more senses, but we'll just work with the five, all right? What are our five senses? Seeing, hearing, touching. Is that the feeling one? Sensory, feeling, taste. Using big words on us. Taste, what's the next one? Smell, that's it, right? So, how do we train these senses? Babies, lemon. Parents are just cruel. I always tell them, look man, that is animal cruelty. Don't do that to the poor child and take photographs and laugh at the poor child. Having her first lemon, that's just cruelty. But that's what we do. We introduce them to lemon and to ice cream and hopefully not soda drinks. This is never do that, please. You're setting them on the wrong path. But that's what we do. We train their senses. You were going to say something? We train their senses in practical way. It's the same thing with Christianity. I know we romanticize the whole spiritual thing, and sometimes we talk about becoming more spiritual as if we just sit under a tree and meditate all day long, we are going to be strong in Jesus Christ. It doesn't work like that. If you are going to become stronger in Jesus Christ, you are going to have to exercise your senses. And he was not being figurative here. It's literal. You have to exercise your senses. And that is my little way of putting it, that, we talk about the retraining process quite a bit, that this is a retraining process. Problem is that when we become Christians beyond our teenage years, even in our teenage years, by the time we're 12 years old, right? Psychologists will tell us, by the time we are 12, we have already almost formed our identity. Our virtues are formed. The retraining process takes some time. So imagine you becoming a Christian when you're 45 years old or 50 years old. And you have to be re-educated, you have to be retrained, and your senses have to be retrained. It's not easy, but that's what we're saying, that you retrain your physical senses by practice to retrain your spiritual sense to practice what God wants us to practice. Can you read that line with me, please? Those two bottom lines in yellow. Let's personalize it. I must retrain my physical senses by practice to retrain my spiritual sense to practice. And here's where it comes now. After a while, you are going to be able to feel, and to think and to act in godly ways about everything. So that song again. Places I used to go, I will go there no more. Why? I can't believe I used to go to those places. Things I used to do, I will do them no more. Why? Like, I'm so ashamed. I cannot believe I used to enjoy doing those things. Words I used to speak, I don't speak those words anymore. It's not because I can't speak them anymore. It's because God doesn't want me to, and because they don't do much good anyways. That is what it is all about. That if you want to become more determined, and if you want to overcome, and if you want to gain the victory, this is where it really comes down. This is what it really comes down to. We have to be willing to let go, right? We have to be willing to allow God to increase and to retrain our minds to think, to feel, right? And to retrain our physical senses so that we don't want to touch certain things anymore. We don't want to see certain things anymore. We don't want to see those things anymore. It's just ungodly stuff, right? We don't want to enjoy those things, and we don't find delight in doing those things anymore. And Paul is telling us that when we retrain our senses, after a while, the spirit is retrained. And remember what we said last time I was here. What retrains our spirit, first of all? Worship. When we come to worship God, we talked about that one. Worship, it might look elementary. It might look like, man, it's just every Sunday, and why can't I miss? It's just every Sunday. But worship is given to us by God to retrain our spirit. Worship is that act that says, first of all, I'm about to worship God that I cannot see, faith. Then I'm going to bow. Remember we talked about the posture of your spirit? Worship is like praying, which is why they're kind of from the same root in terms of words and meanings, because you're bowing to God. Well, when you're worshiping, you're bowing to God, you're giving up your control. And what you're actually saying is that God is actually retraining you through worship, but through educating yourself in God's words, from God's words, and by practicing doing the things that you're supposed to do with the right people, you begin to start feeling the right way and thinking the right way and actually acting the right way about hope. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 1, not on the list. Nope. But it's a good one for us to know. He says that when we start making that change, what happens to us? If you are risen with Christ, you seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. So when you become sensitized, resensitized, and you become retrained by Jesus Christ through God's words, then you start feeling the right way about heaven. You're excited about heaven. You start feeling the right way about love and the things that you're supposed to love. When it comes on to contentment, you're not tempted by those things anymore. Why? Because you start feeling the godly way about what you have, and you're grateful for what you have. You start feeling the right way. You start thinking the right way about these things, and you start acting the right way about these things. But it's a process, and it begins by letting go of bad and keeping the good and moving forward. And then you're going to have to decide that, look, you're going to have to relearn and retrain your mind, and then you're going to have to practically start doing the things that God says you're supposed to do when it is comfortable, and especially when it is uncomfortable. Otherwise, you will never know what victory is. If the only thing you know to do is to give in, you will never know what the victory is. So I find these principles to work for me, and I hope that they can work for you also. So those are the three principles that if you're going to be more determined to press on and to endure and to win, I think they can help you. What do you think? Any comments on them? Anything you'd like to add? And I think we have 0 minutes, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 minutes. But, forgetting and renewing your mind and retraining. Bible study is important, folks. I'm about to do a sermon on Sunday. It might get me fired. I'm going to remind the congregation about worship. I'm going to remind them about Bible study and how important Bible study is. There's a reason why Christians are not staying faithful. It's because they are not allowing God to re-educate them. You cannot know and do what you don't know. You can't accidentally stumble upon heaven's gate. It's a very deliberate action, and you have to be determined for it. If there are no comments or questions, we'll pause here for tonight. All right, thank you so much.